Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation that seeks to uncover the truth behind Rwanda's politics and today specifically its impact on the Great Lakes region. My name is Denise Zaneza, and it is always my honor to host these dialogues on the realities of Paul Kagame's regime, the repression, the silenced voices, the manipulation of narratives, and the ongoing human rights violation that too often escape international scrutiny. Today, we turn our attention to one of the darkest and most underreported dimensions of this story, the use of conflict-related sexual violence as a weapon of war. Far from being random acts of brutality, this violence has been systematically deployed to control, humiliate, and dominate both within Rwanda and across its interventions in the Democratic Republic of Congo. To help us unpack this critical issue, I am honored to be joined by Dr. Masako Yonekawa, an accomplished scholar, researcher, and author whose work has shed vital light on how the RPF regime under Paul Kagame has weaponized sexual violence as part of its broader strategy on power and domination, specifically in DRC. Dr. Masako brings remarkable expertise and insight to this conversation, and I am thrilled to have her with us today. Hello, Masako. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, Denise, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. As I do with all my guests, could you briefly introduce yourself and share what first drew you to study conflict, displacement, and post-genocide dynamics, especially in the Great Lakes region of Africa?
Thank you. So, for the past 15 years, I have been teaching and conducting research in some universities here in Japan, and now I'm working at Kobe College as a professor. I'm
Mhm,
specialized in refugee conflict and African politics, especially Great Lakes. But prior to that, I was a staff member of the UNHCR for 10 years. And I worked mainly in the Great Lakes region. So 3 years in Rwanda from 1995 to 1998,
mhm,
DRC for 4 years, including Goma, in Tanzania, Congo Brazzaville, etc. And when I was with UNHCR in Rwanda in the DRC, I was partly involved in the repatriation of Rwanda refugees from Tanzania, Uganda, DRC to Rwanda. And in 1996, I witnessed the notorious forced repatriation of Rwanda refugees from DRC and Tanzania. And this was one of the most controversial moves in the UNHCR history.
mhm,
And at that time, I was a young staff member of UNHCR, so I didn't have any authority. But I felt until today responsible for many lives of the refugees because they were many of them were killed and disappeared during the repatriation.
mhm,
And I asked myself some questions. Why did these Rwanda refugees have to be pushed back to Rwanda? Is repatriation a really good solution for refugees? Why was conflict in Eastern DRC prolonged for 3 decades? Are UNHCR, other international organizations doing more harm than good? More harm or more good or more harm to the
mhm,
refugees, and what is refugee camp for? So all these questions made me eventually to work as a researcher using my field experience.
mhm,
uh, I have published one book, as you said, Denise, post-genocide Rwanda refugees, why they refuse to return home. This is in reality. I'd like to talk about that later.
Yes,
I'm
please.
also author of two books in Japanese, one on the Congo, another one on the refugees who are manipulated by government, UN, NGOs. I also translated Joseph Sebarenji's book in Japanese. His book is called God Sleeps in Rwanda. And I have also
Mhm.
published some papers in journals. And the most recent one, as you said, is the motivation for the conflict-related sexual violence as a weapon of war in the Eastern DRC.
That is an amazing resume. Clearly, you have seen a lot, especially during your period as a staff member at the UNHCR. And
Mm-hmm.
this really shows also the work that you have done afterwards by asking yourself some questions and doing the research yourself. And this led us to where we are today, discussing about the recent paper on conflict-related sexual violence in Eastern DRC, where you stress that this violence is not random or opportunistic, but systematically motivated and deeply embedded in political and military power structures. You even show how the RPF regime under Paul Kagame in Rwanda has used sexual violence as a weapon to maintain control and project dominance in the region. Um, Masako, could you walk us through your key insights, both about the motivations behind the conflict-related sexual violence and also the challenges you had to face in assessing and working on such a sensitive matter?
Yes, Rwanda has the economic and demographic motivations behind the conflict-related sexual violence, and these
Mhm,
two are interconnected. So, economic means, as you know, control of an illegal exploitation of natural resources in eastern DRC, and demographic means expelling people who are living around mineral-rich areas to clear the way for coltan or other mineral production, and also to settle Rwandans or Congolese Tutsis in the same area so that they can control strategically important areas on behalf of the Rwanda government or its affiliated armed groups. So con- uh, conflict-related sexual violence has been used as a tool or weapon of war in order to expel people
mhm,
because this sexual violence can instill fear to the civilians. So those people who are instilled with fear do not feel like staying in the same place or same house.
of
So
course.
they are dissuaded from ever returning home. So this causes most displaced persons to lose their land. And this forced displacement is exactly the objective of conflict-related sexual violence. And this applies even more to Eastern DRC because it has a lot of minerals there. And so
Mhm,
it's extremely desirable for Rwanda and the world. And in order to control minerals, you need to expel those so-called undesirable residents living in the mineral-rich areas. And since 1996, uh, this uh, conflict-related sexual violence has been ongoing for the past 30 years. But apart from that, there's a legal exploitation of natural resources, as I said, also forced displacement of civilians, as I said, and also the massacre of civilians or genocide has been ongoing. So it's not coincidence that these four crimes, which is conflict-related sexual violence, massacre or genocide, legal exploitation of natural resources, and
mhm,
forced displacements, are taking place in the same region. And they're all interconnected and they're all systematically organized due to the economic and demographic reason. And as a result, global actors have profited from the Rwanda's illegal traffic of natural resources. And that's why global actors have kept silent on this issue for the past three decades. And regarding challenges, I have three of them. First, well, this topic was extremely difficult, and sometimes I had to. I became very, very emotional.
yes, yes, I
So
can
that's one
imagine.
of them, and yeah. And the second one is, as you know, it's extremely difficult to persuade the former RPF related persons to interview
Mhm,
because sharing their stories could endanger their lives. And this happened in the past, as you fully aware. So I
mhm,
only had very few interviewees. But I was very fortunate to have two trustworthy collaborators to interview former RPF officers and soldiers who are outside Rwanda. So these collaborators have a trusting relationship with the former RPF officers, which made it very easy to interview. The third challenges was to counter-argue the previous research on the conflict research in DRC. And since 2002, there have been many research on this topic, and I have read many of them. And some scholars have come up with some arguments or findings which I found misleading or even bizarre. And just to summarize their arguments and findings, they're saying that the conflict related sexual violence committed by the FARDC, which is the Congolese National Army, and
Mm-hmm.
other armed groups, is not political driven, but more to do with sexual needs or desire of some individual officers or soldiers. And some of these soldiers want to prove their masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
or some of them are frustrated with the Congolese National Army discipline problem.
Mm-hmm.
And because the soldiers are being paid, their salary is either insufficient or unpaid, and they also feel neglected by superiors. So that's why they are not able to be a so-called real man. So that's why they cannot fulfill the sexual desire to their wives or girlfriends. And
Mm-hmm.
others also uh, saying that, oh, this sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence is simply the continuation of domestic violence in the peacetime, because
Hmm.
this has become a norm in the not only in DRC, Eastern DRC, but the whole DRC. Others argue that Congolese army and other armed groups, they lack sufficient food and shelter, and that's why they have to depend on the community support to receive food and shelter. So widespread uh, rape against civilians is counterproductive to the armed groups because it can increase civilian hostility towards armed groups.
Mm-hmm.
Others also say that, oh, it's to do with use of drug or alcohol, or there's psychological damage due to the chaos of war, or some soldiers are receiving rewards, money, etc., etc. And some of these factors may apply to some cases, but in general, I found these researchers very, very problematic because they seem to have very little knowledge about Rwanda, first of all, and
That's
they
exact.
uh, don't seem to know that Eastern DRC has been occupied by Rwanda. So all the Rwanda influence has been omitted in their research. And FRDC, Congolese National Army, which is one of the perpetrators of the sexual violence, are no longer a truly national army. And this has affected, obviously, the conflict-related sexual violence. And since 1996, 1997, after the following the end of Mobutu regime, the Congolese army started to mix with the Rwandans, especially those from RPF, but also Interahamwe and some Ugandans. So, and then since then, RPF has been infiltrating and controlling FARDC, Congolese National Army.
Mm-hmm.
And this infiltration has become possible because of the military integration of the
Mm.
Rwandan affiliated armed groups such as RCD and CNDP, etc., into the Congolese army.
Mm-hmm.
So, and even the former RPF intelligence officer who was interviewed, he confirmed that RPF is able to feel the conflict-related sexual violence because the RPF has been infiltrating and controlling the armed groups in Eastern DRC. And those armed groups infiltrated by RPF include FRDC, the Congolese National Army, FDLR, ADF, Mai, and it could be more. So, uh, and apart from this lack of knowledge about Rwanda, these researchers also had a problem with the methodology. I mean, they interviewed the officers and soldiers of Congolese National Army, FRDC, and other armed groups on the territory of DRC. Not so in as you know, there's a very limited freedom of expression, like in Rwanda. So
Yes, they might have interviewed the RPF soldiers who feed them with
yeah,
wrong
that's possible.
information.
Exactly, because they are, as I said, they have infiltrated into the Congolese army and other armed groups, and also those officers who were interviewed were unable to speak about the military secrets regarding the conflict-related sexual violence to the interviewers. So this methodology was really problematic, of course, you know. So that's why I thought that I should come conduct interviews to the former officers, soldiers of the RPF who are in exile, so where there's more freedom of expression.
Yes. Mm.
So that's my that's the motivation challenges. Yeah.
Well, such an amazing work that you have done. And I'm going to be honest, I really had a hard time reading your paper. Like you
Mm,
said, at a certain moment, it really hits you emotionally, and it's very challenging
mm,
to continue reading, because somehow it's very difficult to comprehend how human beings can do such evil towards other human beings.
yes.
Even animals should not be treated like
Mm,
that. And I love the fact that you talked about, you know, this is all related to uh, forced displacement and expelling people from areas
mm-hmm,
where we have rich critical minerals in the DRC. And
mm-hmm,
also you highlighted the 1996 Rwandan refugees that had to return to Rwanda. They were forced,
mm,
many of them, and this is on the record. Many reports have highlighted this. They were killed once they arrived in Rwanda. And so it is very important to really show how these RPF soldiers operate. It's not out of humanity. It is simply, for gain, for control. Um, it has nothing to do with people. And I think it's very important for our audience to understand that anything that comes out of that army is never in the interest of the Congolese people or of the Rwandese people. So
mm-hmm.
and you just talked about the infiltration, how the RPF regime under Paul Kagame has infiltrated those armed groups and reinforced militarized and hegemonic masculinities among perpetrators, while at the same time weakening the morale and masculine authority of local civilians, and effectively silencing them. How, according to you, does understanding these differentiated forms of masculinity, uh, particularly hegemonic, hyper, and militarized masculinities, help us better grasp how conflict-related sexual violence persisted under the RPF regime's control in Eastern DRC?
Yes, I think this masculinity part was one of my greatest contribution in this paper.
Yes, indeed.
Let me explain about this masculinity structure and the hierarchy, which is established through conflict-related sexual violence.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, in any society, you know, some men have greater power than others. So masculinity of men in lower rank is subordinate within the hierarchy, you know? And just to simplify for the audience, try to imagine a pyramid, a structure, a pyramid, the triangle structure. So on
Mhm.
the bottom, you have victims and civilian men. And on the top of the pyramid, you have perpetrators, rulers, military. On, and so there's a hierarchy between the male wartime enemies, the perpetrator and the victims, you know?
Yes.
For the case of Eastern DRC, on the bottom of pyramid, there are Congolese victims and the civilian man. And on top of pyramid, you have RPF or RDF. And before I talk about how this hierarchy was established, I just want to say that in DRC, in many other countries, male partners, husbands, and fathers of the women are considered as protectors of women.
Yes.
So once women are raped, these men feel they are disempowered or so-called feminized. They become women, weakened by the perpetrators, because perpetrators can they demonstrate that these victim men are unable to protect their women and the
Mm-hmm.
community. Yeah. So, and at the same time, perpetrators who commit conflict-related sexual violence are empowered. So I think it's important to understand that this conflict-related sexual violence is very humiliating act for the victim man. And moreover, as I said, there has been forced displacement in Eastern DRC repeatedly for the past 30 years. So um, the rape victims or survivors, the families, and the communities are further empowered through this repeated forced displacement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the former RPF Congolese officer, who's a Congolese man, he said in interview that we Congolese men cannot even dare speak about conflict-related sexual violence because we fear that the RPF can physically eliminate us. They really have a strong fear against the RPF and RDF, which is natural, of course. And so coming back to this hierarchy, the pyramid hierarchy, as I said,
Mm-hmm.
so RPF was able to establish this structure of masculinity, not only because Rwanda is a military superpower and they have a lot of weapons and that can help to exercise power over the unarmed population, but because it has also because RPF has been fueling and ordering systematically the conflict-related sexual violence. And this order rape um, is not well reported, well known. So I just want to say a little bit more about this.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the former RPF intelligence officer who was interviewed, RPF ordered its members to rape and kill civilians. Another ex RPF soldier also said that RPF created special units that are trained by the defense intelligence on how to commit mass rape as a weapon of war. And Congolese warlords or individuals, they form armed groups after receiving training from these special units, and they also commit uh, conflict-related sexual violence after receiving orders from the RPF. So, as you can see, it's very, very systematic, and as a result of this control of armed groups, RPF was able to dominate masculinity in the Eastern DRC, and they're able to weaken residents there. And that's how it facilitated the application of conflict-related sexual violence as a weapon of war. I hope this is clear. I know it's a bit confusing.
It is not confusing. It's just it's a very tough topic um, to approach and to talk about. But it is very important for us to and especially and this saying this to our audience, we need to talk about this type of topics that are very hard to grasp, that are very difficult to talk about, because this is
Mm,
really the basis of everything that is going on in DRC, in Eastern DRC, enable for the Paul Kagame regime to maintain control. They have to eliminate any social structure. And you just talked about how it is very important, mostly in all African countries, especially in Eastern
Mm,
DRC, that men protect their families. So if you remove that from the
mm,
men, they remain with nothing. They like you said, they are even afraid to talk about it because they know they can be eliminated at any time. So I think it's very important for our audience to understand this and to know what is beneath everything that we see on the in the media, everything that we see or that we hear. This is really the base. This is where they start. And they have been doing this for so many years. How the RDF, for those who don't understand RDF, the Rwanda Defense Force, how they have been training other armed groups in Eastern DRC to commit mass rapes. This is horrific. This is terrible. And everybody should be talking about this. And everybody should be advocating for change and for this to end. But we'll come to that at the end of this conversation.
mm.
Moving forward, your research also points to the broader socio-political dimensions of the conflict-related sexual violence, and it's used to devastate community fabrics, like I just said, not just individuals, and also to expel the undesirable population and seize control over rich mineral territories, like we have just highlighted. And it's it's a form of genocidal rape used to erase identity, humiliate men, and depopulate desired land. Did your findings confirm that the conflict-related sexual violence, particularly in under the RPF regime's agenda, functioned as a deliberate tool to destroy not just men's bodies, but entire communities and identities for a broader economic and a demographic gain? Like you have kind of highlighted this, but can you really show us how in your study you were able to demonstrate this?
Yes, my research confirms that conflict-related sexual violence functions as a deliberate tool to destroy the whole community so that RPF can increase its economic and demographic gain. Of course, my study is limited because I only had a few interviewees, as I said before,
Hmm.
and there's still a need to examine the extent of RPF's infiltration and control of the armed groups in Eastern DRC and how systematic order rape has been conducted, etc., etc. Um, so regarding why uh, conflict-related sexual violence is called as genocidal genocide rape, just to summarize, um, sexual violence can and will eventually destroy the community in wide areas and across generation. And this destruction occurs because conflict-related sexual violence and forced displacement can disempower women, men, and community, as I said before. Also, because conflict-related sexual violence can lead to women's inability to give birth. So that means there'll be less and less population, and eventually that can destroy the community.
Hmm.
And also, why uh, why conflict-related sexual violence is called as a weapon of war. There are many reasons for this. As I said before, this can instill fear to the civilians, and that can cause victims, their family, community to flee. But also, conflict-related sexual violence tends to blame victims only, not the perpetrators. And it's very hard for victims to show proof because the assault is occurring in the private zone, and you cannot really show to anybody. And also, there's a shame associated with sexual violence. And because of this shame, victims are often unwilling to file charges against the perpetrators. So
Hmm.
that's why that's how victims become silenced. And this silent situation of victims is a big advantage to the perpetrators, and
Of
they
course.
remain unpunished. So this silent situation, I mean, not a silent, but silenced situation of victims
Mm-hmm.
was worsened by the impunity of perpetrators. And as I said, there's also a silenced situation of the protectors. For this case, is Congolese men. All these factors contribute to make the weapons of war ripe, attractive for perpetrators. And also, regarding the characteristics of conflict-related sexual violence, this is a cheap and effective weapon because you use only your body. There's no need, you don't need to purchase a weapon like AK-47, and you don't need to maintain. So this means that any healthy man can commit sexual violence easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the biggest characteristics. And I think we also have to think about the negative consequence, especially long-term negative consequence, which is not well known. Um, well, the victims or survivors, they obviously they have some of them have problem with unwanted pregnancy, uh, or the risk of HIV/AIDS, which can exacerbate the rape trauma. And when their sexual organs are damaged, women lose the ability to control their bladders and bowels.
Yes.
And the victimized women are considered worthless because they have difficulty in engaging in heavy work, like the agriculture work, and they cannot bear children. So men avoid having relationship with them. So these women are can be abandoned, by the community, by the family and community. And also, the women's suffering affects the economic livelihoods of the communities because rape victims cannot continue their activities, as I said, as they're physically and psychologically weakened.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a strong fear of being raped once they go out in the field. So, women's inability to produce food results in food shortage and malnutrition and poverty. And as you know, Denise, Eastern DRC is a food basket area, just like Rwanda.
Yes,
So
indeed.
there shouldn't be any food shortage or severe malnutrition, And also, family members of raped women are affected because they are also forced to watch the rape if the rape takes place at home. And even if many women and girls survive being raped, many never recover from the physical, psychological, and social effects.
Mm.
So this means that even if the women are physically alive, they could be psychologically weakened or even half dead, as one of my interviews said. So all these negative effects will have a long-term consequence in the subsequent generations, and especially with the population who are not capable of reproducing. And I just want to say that that's why it's called genocidal rape. And I just want to say that about Dr. Mukwege, who has done extraordinary work trying to end conflict-related sexual violence. As you know, he's a gynecologist, and he must have witnessed all the scenery on a daily basis. So he must have a. That's why I think he has a stronger sense of crisis for his country. That maybe, and especially in Eastern DRC, that maybe all the population will be destroyed, community will be destroyed. So what's going to happen to his country? I'm sure he has all these worries and concerns, and that's why he has been appealing endlessly for the end of conflict-related sexual violence. But and just to recall, when he, uh, I think it was back in October 2023, when he uh, became the candidate of the DRC president, presidential election, the first thing he was said that this country may be gone. That's why I'm here to. I want to become a president to save my country. This is what he said, and probably not many reporters have reported this, but I think this is a big message, and it's related with this conflict related sex violence. So yeah, I think that's important to for the audience to know.
Um, well, thank you so much for bringing this to light and for explaining in a clear way what is really going on and the consequences of these conflict-related sexual violence on the populations in Eastern DRC. You just talked about um, Denis Mukwege. I read his book
Mhm.
a few years ago, and when I was reading your paper, I was like, oh my God, if I had read your paper before reading the book, everything, both of them, like they fall together, like they
Mhm.
complement each other because he really talks about the experiences of those women and the experience on the ground, what he sees and how he helps those women recover from these traumatic events. But with your paper,
Yes.
you can
Mhm.
really put things into perspective and say, this is the reason why all of this is happening. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
and I could really relate. And the first thing I thought about after reading your paper was, oh my God, the book of Denis Mukwege. This is what he was talking about. And for me,
Mhm.
your paper and his book, I think they should be sold together, or you need to find
Mhm.
a
Yeah.
way to
And
to collaborate.
uh, by the way, I have known Dr. Mukwege because he came to Japan twice, and my friends and I, we have invited him. And
Oh,
so,
wonderful. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
we have talked about this issue. And I just want to say that through my work, I really understood how courageous Dr. Mukwege is to highlight this very humiliating issue for Congolese men. It's not just a sensitive issue or political issue, but it's a humiliating issue, and not all the Congolese men can do that. I think.
Yes, and he was able to bring to light what many people could not talk about it, and he did it in a very classy way, I would say, by respecting the victims and
Mhm, mhm.
also by acknowledging not only the victims but also the pain of the male population in the area. So
Yes.
both of you
Yeah,
really
absolutely. Yeah.
thank you for your work. And like I said, you should find a way to collaborate because your paper and his book should go along every time.
I'll think about it. Thank you very much for your suggestion.
You're welcome. So moving on, Masako, you wrote a book a few years ago, Post Genocide Rwandan Refugees, Realities and Myths. Um, I would like us to talk about it. Could you tell our audience what this book was about in general?
Yes, this research is basically about the repatriation problem. And as the title says, Rwanda refugees have refused categorically to return home. And I think it was very important to publish this book because there's a lot of misunderstanding on Rwanda refugees. And many people who don't know about the politics there say that, oh, Rwanda is a very peaceful country, so why are there still refugees? Why can't they go back home? But um, well, first of all, I think repatriation in general is very political movement, but this is not well known, except for the refugees, of course. And what made me really motivated to write this book is because about 10 years ago, I think precisely in 2009. The Rwanda
Mm-hmm.
government and UNHCR and other governments in Africa, they have
Mm-hmm.
decided to apply cessation clause, which is
Yes.
highly, highly contested. And just for the audience, this cessation clause means that refugee status will be ended when the fundamental durable changes have taken place in their refugees' country of origin. And also the circumstances that led to flights no longer exist. So this means that once the cessation clause is applied, host countries and UNHCR will no longer able to protect refugees. So refugees either have to return home, or either they will be, even in the worst case, can be expelled, as what
Mm-hmm.
happened in late 1996 from Zaire and Tanzania. And if you're lucky, they can get citizenship in the host country, or they can seek asylum elsewhere. But anyway, this cessation clause was a big, big a controversial issue, but but eventually this cessation clause has failed. You know,
Yes.
I know that Rwanda government and UNHCR have not admitted so in public, but it has failed. And I really want to congratulate all the Rwandan refugees for their resistance and also the victory. Now, of course, I know they didn't have any choice but to resist, but their
Yes.
resistance was very strong. And I could tell from my interview with many Rwandan refugees. And as I said, this repatriation, um, whether it's for Rwandans or other nationals, is a very political movement. And I want to explain about that. And first of all, Rwanda government has been very, very aggressive in repatriating refugees. They even uh, force some of them to return home. And we need to ask why they have done this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too well. There's some answers for this, reasons for this. Of course, Rwanda always want to promote international image. So
Of course.
if
Yes.
they have, if it's known that they have their citizens outside the country, especially outspoken people like you, Denise, that doesn't give a very good image of the country.
Yes.
And yeah, and so the Rwanda government has been repatriating refugees. They have been aggressive in repatriating refugees, and this is political motivated for two reasons. Um, First, well, RPF leadership, including Paul Kagame, they have been they grew up in exile for 30 years, so they understand very very well the psychology of the refugees, and having a big number of Rwanda population outside the country is a very destabilizing factor. And also, secondly, having the population inside Rwanda, meaning uh, once the refugees go back to the countries, this is the only way to control people in within their territory.
Yes.
And so that's why they wanted people, the refugees, to come back home. I also think that uh, Paul Kagame must have a very strong fear of the refugees, and in particular those who are the former RPF officers, because they're fully aware of the of Paul Kagame's weakness, well as and also the responsibility involvement in the serious crimes committed by RPF in both Rwanda and DRC. Actually, one RPF dissident told me that
Mm-hmm.
RPF has no intention to repatriate all the refugees because the government's real aim is to destabilize and silence the refugee community. So he also told me that the RPF aims to threaten refugees with repeated repatriation calls, although they don't have any intention to repatriate. And maybe I will just tell you a little bit about why I conducted this research on this repatriation of the Rwandan refugees.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as I said, I was working with UNHCR in Rwanda, and at the time, we were told that voluntary repatriation is the most appropriate solution. And it's true that repatriation or return means home sweet home. And for me, Rwanda was my first country to work with UNHCR, so I didn't know anything about this repatriation. So I just believed this this common sense that
Mm-hmm.
repatriation is the most appropriate solution. So I facilitated repatriation until late 1996,
Mm-hmm.
when these massive refugees were forcibly repatriated. And I saw at the time I saw the expression of refugees. There were no excitement, no smile. They're just walking in silence. And also when I was in Goma 10 years later, I was involved with the repatriation of Rwanda refugees. And again, there's no smile. And even if I ask them, how do you feel? No answer,
Mm-hmm.
and just silence. And I thought that was very, very strange.
They
So
were
that
they were
means that
afraid.
they are afraid. Yes, they didn't say so, but they're afraid. I only learned that later that yeah, they were afraid to return home, but maybe didn't have any choice. So this means that this UNHCR slogan that repatriation is the most appropriate solution turned out to be wrong. And when I heard about the cessation clause, as I said, which was a very controversial decision, mainly because human rights violations have been reported in Rwanda, and also a lot of Rwandans have been fleeing the country, including the entourage of Kagame. And I believe that all these refugees have well-founded fear of persecution, which is exactly written in the refugee definition. And then I said, why UNHCR is doing this? Why UNHCR has not learned the lessons especially from 1996 forced repatriation.
Mm-hmm.
I even asked Mr. Antonio Guterres when he was the High Commissioner of Refugees, when he around 2013, when he came to Japan on a visit. I met him in one reception. So I asked him, so why UNHCR uh, has applied the cessation clause? And he simply said that, oh, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and he just ran away from me. And I realized that the cessation clause around refugees must be a really political sensitive issue.
Yes, politically
And
motivated.
yes, exactly. And in 2004, I met a lady called Barbara Harabond, and she was from Oxford University, and she was specialized in refugee studies. Well, she was already retired at the time. And I met her, and actually, she led a group of scholars, refugees, and journalists, etc., to exchange information and analyze the cessation clause. So I became part of this group, and at the same time, I obtained a research fund. So that
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to travel to different countries and interview Rwandan refugees. So that's how I was able to publish this book. And I did my research. I did my interview with refugees in African countries, in European countries, and North American countries, and all of them, they have suffered enormously. Uh, Partly because they have been discriminated by UNHCR in host
Mm-hmm.
countries and international
Mm-hmm.
community. Which, in the case of Hutu, they were treated as genocides.
Mm-hmm. Always, yes.
So yeah, so they really felt abandoned by the world. And as I said, I was part of the UNHCR, so I also feel very, very guilty about this. And I even learned that some refugees they were compelled to change their nationality from Rwandans to Congolese in order to survive and in order to avoid discrimination and bias on the part of UNHCR. So obviously, when you disguise your nationality and you have a fake ID cards, that can change your you have to change your identity.
Hmm.
And I know some parents have difficulty telling their children, when the children ask you, "Oh, where are we from?" You know, and they cannot say we're from Rwanda because they have disguised their nationality. So that was
Yes.
really painful story to listen to. But obviously, shamefully, UNHCR doesn't know all these these stories, and how the refugees have managed to survive even by disguising their nationalities, and that can affect the long-term generations, such as I said, just like the conflict-related sexual violence, that can has a long-term impact to their generations. So yeah, this research was also very, very tough and difficult emotionally, especially because I was a UNHCR staff member who worked in Rwanda. So
Hmm.
I
Yes.
hope many Rwanda refugees, plus other policymakers and scholars, will read my book, because this is the only book which has talked about why Rwanda refugees have refused to return home. And
Yes. And thank you so
yes,
much for that amazing work that you have done.
thank you very
Uh,
much.
no, really, thank you. And there's a lot of misunderstanding, like you said, about the Rwandan refugees. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
no one wants to live under a dictatorship, and no
No,
one wants to go back to live under a regime that is responsible
hmm,
for the killings of your own people. And I think a lot
exactly.
of people forget that when a lot of Rwandans had to flee in 1994 and went to Congo, to Tanzania, and other places, they were fleeing the massacres of the RPF. And
Yes.
people don't talk about this. And
Hmm. Hmm.
the reason why, like you said, Paul Kagame's regime is very afraid of Rwandan refugees is because they know what they have done. And they are
Hmm.
afraid that these refugees might come back and say, hey, we need a democratic country. We need a country where there's no dictatorship, and we want justice for our loved ones, and we want justice for ourselves because we are survivors of the killings of the RPF. So they see it as a danger, like you said. And when they force these refugees to go back, it is only to control them. And we see it even now. They are still brainwashing. They are still training Rwandan people to think in a certain way. They want to control the narrative. And every time you say anything that doesn't fall in line with the propaganda that they want to
Hmm.
spread, you are a genocide denier. You committed
Exactly.
you committed genocide. Um,
Yes.
you hate the country. The most recent example is Moses Turahirwa. He was the creative mind behind the fashion brand Motions that even the president wears. Okay, but
Uh-huh.
and then one day he tweeted, and I think he wrote it on his Instagram, and he said that he hates the RPF regime, and
Hmm.
since then he's in prison. Okay, so I hope, Masako, that you are ready to be called genocide denier from now on, since you have high, since you have
Yeah,
exposed,
although I have never denied it.
you have never, but be ready to be called that, because that's the way they operate. I also get it all the time on social media, like, why don't you come to Rwanda and say all of this in Rwanda? I said, yeah, but Victoire Ingabire is in prison right now again, on trumped up
Yes.
charges, and Deo
Yes. Mm,
Mushaidi is still in prison,
exactly.
pointing out human rights violations committed by Paul Kagame's regime. You have journalists, Dieudonné Nyonsenga and others who are now maybe for 4 years, I think, in prison, simply for giving a voice to the population. So this is also one of the reasons why people don't go back. You cannot go back to that.
Of course, you're afraid, and you have a strong trauma, of course, you know.
So again,
Yeah,
thank you so much for your book, Post-Genocide
thank
Rwandan
you.
Refugees, Realities and Myths. And I hope everybody who feels compelled by Rwandan stories, who wants to know what is really going on, I hope you buy the book, and I will put the links under the description of our podcast so that the ones who want to get a copy can get it easily.
Thank you.
Um, Moving towards the end of our conversation, is there anything in particular you would like to say to our listeners?
I just want to, yeah, say that either they're Rwandans or Congolese or whoever, never give up, and you have to, you know, believe in yourself and continue. Let us continue our struggle for justice.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end our conversation. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today, and a heartfelt thank you to our incredible guest, Masako Yonekawa, for taking the time for us today and bringing such a sensitive topic and tragedy of the conflict-related sexual violence to light. It is a very heavy topic, and I hope that the more we talk about these atrocities and also name the perpetrators, that this will help not only in aiding it, not only in ending this tragedy, but also getting justice for the victims and survivors. Thank you so much, Masako.
Thank you, Denise. It was really my honor to talk to you too.
Yes, the honor was all mine. Let me close by saying this. Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo deserve peace, justice, and dignity. For decades now, Paul Kagame's dictatorship has not only oppressed Rwandans, but also fueled war and committed atrocities across the borders in Congo. Millions of innocent Congolese lives have been lost or shattered because of the RPF regime. The world must no longer turn a blind eye. Silence in the face of tyranny and mass atrocities is complicity. Real partnerships between Western countries and African nations must be rooted in respect, humanity, and mutual benefit, not in supporting dictators who thrive on bloodshed and instability. But change will not happen if we remain passive. As we say in Kinyarwanda, Imana ifasha uwifashije. God helps those who help themselves. Rwandans and Congolese people must demand accountability, justice, and true democracy. So I urge everyone who believes in human rights, peace, and rule of law to break the silence, to raise your voice, and to stand up against tyranny, against Paul Kagame's dictatorship, his crimes in Rwanda, and his crimes in DRC. Until next time, thank you all for listening, and may justice and peace prevail in Rwanda, in Congo, and in the whole Great Lakes region.